What would you do if you saw a 90-year-old man pushing a long line of shopping carts under the burning sun just to afford medicine for his sick wife? Most people would walk by, but not Justin Bieber. The low rumble of Justin's custom motorcycle broke the morning stillness in a nearly empty grocery store parking lot. He wasn't there for publicity or even to shop. Just a quiet morning ride before the world woke up. But fate had other plans. As he turned off the engine and removed his helmet, something caught his eye. A frail, elderly man, bent with age, was struggling, truly struggling, to push an impossibly long row of carts back into place. His movements were slow, shaky. Every few feet, he paused, gripping his knee in pain. The sun hadn't even reached its peak, yet sweat soaked the back of his faded uniform. The man looked tired, not just physically, but soul-tired. Still, he kept going. Justin watched in silence, not wanting to intrude. But there was something about the man's quiet resilience that gripped him. There was no audience, no applause, just a man doing what needed to be done, because life had given him no other choice. He didn't know the man's name yet. He didn't know about the ailing wife waiting at home, about the house they had sold, about the love that had endured through Alzheimer's and aging bones. But Justin felt something stir, a quiet urgency. Sometimes the biggest stories come from the most ordinary places. And what Justin did next, without cameras, without fanfare, would change the course of that man's life forever, not just because of who he was, but because of what he saw and what he chose to do about it. Before we dive in, take a moment to ask yourself, would you notice? Would you stop? Or would you keep walking? Stay with us, because this story isn't about celebrity. It's about humanity, the morning struggle. The morning air was crisp, almost kind, as Earl arrived at the grocery store parking lot, his battlefield of sorts. The sun hadn't yet begun its cruel climb into the summer sky, but he knew better than to expect mercy. By noon, the asphalt would be scorching, the carts heavier, and the pain in his knees sharper. He eased out of his old sedan, a car that groaned more than it started. Grabbing his faded blue work vest from the back seat, he slipped it on like armor, creased, worn, but dependable. Each stitch told a story, not of glory, but of survival. Another day, he muttered under his breath, a phrase he whispered every morning, not with excitement, not even with hope, just routine. Around him, life moved quickly. Cars darted in and out, shoppers bustled, to-do lists in hand, oblivious to the silent figure collecting the metal skeletons they abandoned after use. He didn't blame them. Most people didn't notice a man like him anymore. Earl's hands were rough, calloused from years of labor. His back curved slightly, and he walked with the careful steps of someone who'd learned the cost of every movement. Still, he worked with methodical discipline, aligning carts into neat rows, pushing them back toward the storefront. The ache in his knee grew sharper with every step, but he gritted his teeth. He couldn't afford to stop. Minutes lost meant complaints, and complaints meant fewer hours. Fewer hours meant less money. And money, well, money was the thread holding together the frayed edges of his life. Just as he began aligning a particularly unwieldy row of carts, a sharp voice sliced through the parking lot. "Earl! What's going on here? Why are these carts still scattered all over?" It was the manager, young, impatient, and perpetually annoyed. Always in a rush, always needing someone to blame. Earl straightened, trying not to wince. "I'm getting everything in order, sir. Just need a few more minutes." The manager rolled his eyes, arms crossed. "A few more minutes? That's no excuse. If you were faster, we wouldn't need two people doing your job." Earl didn't answer. He knew better. Pride had its place, but not here. Not when every dollar counted. Instead, he nodded and turned back to the carts, pushing with renewed force. The wheels clattered loudly, echoing through the lot. Behind him, the manager was already walking away, chatting with another employee. Earl didn't care. He didn't have time for resentment, but pain doesn't ask for permission. As he reached for a loose cart that had begun to roll toward a customer's car, a sharp spasm shot up through his leg. He managed to stop the cart in time but had to lean on it for support, breathing hard. One more day, he whispered to himself. Just one more day. He looked up at the sky, which was now streaked with morning light. He wasn't asking for a miracle, just strength, just enough to make it home to Margaret. What Earl didn't know was that he was being watched. Across the parking lot, leaning against a sleek motorcycle, stood a man in a black leather jacket and sunglasses. He had been there long enough to witness the struggle, the reprimand, the silent endurance. That man was Justin Bieber. He hadn't meant to stop here, but something, call it intuition, fate, or just plain timing, had brought him to this lot, at this hour, on this day. From behind his shades, Justin's eyes followed Earl's every move. He saw the way the old man winced but kept moving, the way he didn't argue back, the way he kept his head down but never let his dignity slip. Justin crossed his arms, his expression unreadable. But in his chest, a storm had already begun to stir. There were no cameras, no screaming fans, no red carpets, just a man quietly pushing through his pain so his wife could live a little longer. And for Justin, that was more powerful than any stage he'd ever stood on. Earl was so focused on keeping the carts from slipping that he didn't notice the footsteps approaching behind him. He flinched slightly when a voice broke through the noise, a calm, steady voice, both unfamiliar and oddly reassuring. "Need a hand with that?" Startled, Earl turned and looked up. A tall man in a black jacket and sunglasses stood beside him, his hand resting casually on a cart. His voice wasn't demanding or mocking. It was kind. Earl squinted, confused. The man looked familiar somehow, like someone he might have seen on TV once, but he couldn't place the face. No, Earl replied, catching his breath. "Don't worry about it, sir. I've got it under control." The man didn't move. His expression remained soft, and a slight smile played on his lips. "I insist," he said gently, already stepping forward to help align the crooked carts. Earl hesitated. He wasn't used to help, especially not from strangers. Especially not from strangers who looked like they belonged anywhere but in a grocery store parking lot. Still, something in the man's tone disarmed him. There was no pity, just a genuine offer. "Well," Earl said, nodding toward another unruly cluster of carts, "if you really want to help, you can start with those." The man nodded, as if accepting a sacred mission. Without another word, he moved toward the carts and began pushing them into place. He worked quickly but carefully, mimicking Earl's method. There was no awkwardness in the way he moved. He wasn't doing it for show. They worked in silence for a few minutes. The morning heat was creeping in, and Earl wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. Eventually, the man spoke again. "How long have you been doing this?" Earl paused, glanced at him, then shrugged. "A few years, give or take. Ever since my wife got sick. I needed a job. Bills don't stop just because life gets hard." The man nodded slowly. "She's sick?" "Alzheimer's," Earl replied, his voice softening. "Started a few years back. At first it was small things, names, places. Then one day she forgot who I was. That was the hardest part." "I'm sorry," the man said, his tone sincere. Earl gave a tired smile. "It is what it is. Some days she remembers a little. Most days, she doesn't. But she's still there. Somewhere inside, and that's enough for me." They pushed. Another row of carts together. The man didn't interrupt. He just listened. "I sold our house to pay for the treatments," Earl continued. "Furniture, car, everything that didn't matter. I kept the essentials, what she needs, what helps, her stay comfortable." The man glanced sideways at Earl. "That's a lot to carry." Earl let out a short laugh. You don't carry it all at once. You just keep going, one day at a time. There was a pause, the kind that held more meaning than any words could fill. The two of them stood still for a moment, watching the bustle of the parking lot. Life moved around them, unaware of the quiet conversation taking place. "Let's grab a drink," the man finally said. "My treat." Earl raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" The man nodded. "You've earned it." They walked together to a small cafe inside the grocery store. The man ordered 2 black coffees without asking Earl's preference, as if he knew simplicity was what Earl needed. They sat outside on a shaded bench, steam rising from the paper cups. "You're not from around here, are you?" Earl asked, taking a sip. The man chuckled. "Not really. I travel a lot." Earl studied him again. There was something in the voice, in the way he carried himself. Something familiar. "Have we met before?" he asked, narrowing his eyes. The man smiled, but didn't answer the question. "You remind me of someone," he said instead. "Someone strong." Earl laughed softly. "Strong? I don't know about that. Maybe just stubborn." "Same thing some days," the man replied, then added, "Have you ever thought about retiring?" Earl snorted. "Retire? With what money? I barely. Make enough to keep the lights on and her medications coming in. Retirement's a luxury. For us, it's about survival." The man looked down at his coffee cup, his face unreadable. "You've done so much for her." Earl's voice grew quieter. "That's what love is, isn't it? You do what you have. Too. Not because it's easy, not because someone's watching, but because that person needs you. And because once upon a time, she did the same for me." The man sat still, his eyes distant now. He seemed lost in Earl's words, like they were peeling back something he hadn't confronted in a long time. "You're a good man, Earl," he said finally. Earl shrugged. "Just a man who keeps showing up." The man leaned back on the bench, watching the sunlight dance across the asphalt. "Sometimes, that's what makes all the difference." They sat in silence again, letting the weight of the moment settle. Around them, the noise of the parking lot faded into the background. For a little while, it was just 2 men, 2 stories, 2 lives that never should have intersected, but did. And though neither of them said it, they both felt it. Something had just shifted. The rest of their break passed quietly, with just the occasional sip of coffee and shared glances that said more than words ever could. Justin leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, looking out at the parking lot like it was a stage on which something sacred had just unfolded. Earl, meanwhile, sat back, one hand cradling his cup, the other rubbing his sore knee absent-mindedly. "Do you mind if I ask something more personal?" Justin finally said, his voice low, careful. Earl didn't flinch. "You can ask. Doesn't mean I'll answer." Justin gave a light chuckle. "Fair enough. But how are you managing the treatment now? You said you sold most everything. What's keeping you going?" Earl exhaled slowly through his nose, as if letting go of something invisible. "Just this job. That's it. It's not much, but it keeps the fridge stocked and the pharmacy happy. Barely. Some months I have to skip a dose or 2. Stretch the medication. You do what you have to." Justin's hands tightened around his coffee cup. "And you? How do you take care of yourself?" That made Earl laugh. Not a joyful laugh, but the dry, bitter kind born from years of survival. "I don't. No time, no money, but it's okay. I've had my time. Now it's hers." The statement hung in the air, soft and powerful, like a prayer. They both went silent again, this time not out of awkwardness, but out of respect. Justin had heard stories of resilience before. He had even lived some. But this quiet kind, of love, the daily sacrifices made without complaint, this was different. This wasn't a headline. It was a heartbeat. "Have you ever thought of asking for help?" he asked after a while. Earl shook his head immediately. "People have their own problems. I don't want to burden anyone. And pride, well, pride's a A funny thing, it keeps you standing, even when you probably should sit down. Justin smiled faintly, almost sadly. You're not alone in thinking that. But sometimes, accepting help is the bravest thing you can do. Earl didn't respond. His eyes drifted toward the horizon. Most days, I pray, he said finally. Not for miracles, just for one more day, one more good moment with her. That's all I ever ask. Justin looked at him closely, searching for the right words. None came. So instead, he placed a hand gently on Earl's shoulder. The gesture was small, brief, but it sent something deep through both of them. Earl didn't flinch. He simply nodded. You're an admirable man, Justin said quietly. The world needs more people like you, Earl smiled. I'm just doing what anyone would do for someone they love. But Justin knew that wasn't true. Not everyone would go this far. Not everyone could. After a few more moments of silence, Earl pushed himself up from the bench with a soft grunt. Break's over, he said. Time to get back to it. I'll help, Justin offered immediately. Earl looked at him, amused. You sure you want to get your hands dirty again? Justin grinned. Let's just say I'm invested now. They returned to the parking lot, this time moving in tandem. The rhythm came naturally. A cart here, a row there. They didn't speak, much. Just the occasional nod, the occasional comment. But there was comfort in that too. Not all connections need constant conversation. Then, as they wrangled a particularly chaotic row of carts into alignment, Justin asked casually, So, you mentioned your wife. How's she doing today? Earl paused for a moment, leaning on the cart. She's steady. Some days are better than others. Today's a quiet one. She was holding our wedding photo when I left. She does that a lot. Does she remember? Sometimes. I see it in her eyes. A flicker. A spark. I live for those moments. Justin stayed quiet, moved by the tenderness in Earl's voice. She was the sharp one, Earl continued. Back in the day, she remembered everything. Birthdays, recipes, even our old neighbors' names. Now it's all jumbled, like her memories are snow in the wind. Sometimes they land, but mostly they disappear. Justin swallowed hard. That must be tough. It is, Earl said simply. But loving someone means being there when it's hard, not just when it's easy. There it was again. Truth delivered so plainly, it left no room for argument. As the sun crept higher, painting golden streaks across the concrete, Justin felt something settle inside him. A decision, maybe, or a calling. He didn't know what to call it, but it was there. When Earl's shift neared its end, they finished stacking the last few carts and stood side by side, breathing in the summer air. Thanks for the help, Earl said, brushing his hands on his vest. Of course, Justin replied. I'm glad I stopped. Don't take this the wrong way, Earl said, smirking. But you don't exactly look like a guy who hangs out in parking lots. Justin laughed. I guess today, I'm just someone who was in the right place at the right time. Earl extended his hand. Well, I'm glad you were. They shook hands firmly, one strong from decades of labor, the other from years of holding microphones, instruments, and maybe too many expectations. Yet in that handshake, they were equals. I hope we meet again, Justin said. If you keep showing up around here, Earl replied. We probably will. As Earl walked toward his car, Justin stood still, watching. The old man's back was curved, his steps slow, but there was something powerful in the way he moved. Like a man who'd chosen not to be defeated, no matter how many reasons he had to be. And in that moment, Justin made a silent vow. He couldn't change the past, but he could do something about the future. Not tomorrow, not eventually, now. That night, Justin couldn't sleep. He sat in the quiet of his home, lights dim, phone face down, the city a distant murmur beyond his windows. The world around him was full of luxury. Leather furniture, framed records on the walls, a kitchen, too sleek for someone who barely cooked. But his thoughts weren't in this house. They were with Earl. Earl, who pushed carts in silence. Earl, who held on to love even as time pulled it away. Earl, who gave everything and asked for nothing. Justin leaned forward, elbows on knees, staring at the floor. His mind replayed every detail. The way Earl winced when he walked. The pain hidden behind a tired smile. The way he talked about Margaret like she was the beginning and end of everything. He could hear his own voice from earlier. Sometimes accepting help is the bravest thing you can do, and yet Earl had never asked. Not once. That's what haunted Justin most. By morning, he'd made his decision. When he arrived back at the grocery store, it wasn't on a motorcycle. This time he came in a black SUV, parked far from the main entrance. No sunglasses, no leather jacket, just quiet intention. Inside, the store buzzed with early shoppers and the smell of freshly baked bread. Justin headed straight for the manager's office, knocking once before stepping inside. The manager looked up, surprised. Can I help you?" Justin closed the door behind him. "Yes, I'm here to talk about Earl." The manager blinked. "Earl?" "He works the lot," Justin said. "Pushes carts, grey vest, kind eyes, never complains." The manager nodded slowly. "Yeah, that's him. Hard worker. Quiet." Justin took a breath, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded check. He laid it gently on the desk. "I want to pay his salary for the next few months, and I want you to give him some paid days off. Let him rest. But don't tell him it's from me. Tell him it's a bonus, a company initiative, whatever sounds believable." The manager stared at the check, jaw slightly open. "That's really generous." "He won't accept it if he knows where it came from," Justin said. "And I don't want him to feel like a charity case. He's not. He's a hero." The manager ran a hand through his hair, still processing. "I mean, sure, I think we can make that work." Justin nodded. "Good. There's more." He slid a second envelope across the desk, this one with details of a local pharmacy and a business card attached. "He gets his wife's meds from this place. I've already arranged payment for the next several months. They'll keep it quiet." The manager looked up, finally realizing just how serious Justin was. "You know," he said slowly, "he's not going to believe it. He'll think something's off." "Let him," Justin said. "Let him wonder. Just don't let him worry." Before leaving, Justin made a quick stop by the cafe where he and Earl had shared coffee. He ordered 2 cups and carried them back to the parking lot, the morning sun already warming the pavement. There, near the far end of the lot, was Earl, his hands gripping a cart, his back slightly hunched, moving slowly but surely. "Round 2, Justin said, holding out the coffee. Earl looked up, surprised, and then smiled. "You again?" "Couldn't stay away," Justin replied. "This place grows on you." Earl took the cup with a grateful nod. "You're either very kind or very bored." "Maybe both," Justin grinned. "Got time for another break?" They sat again on the same bench as the day before. It felt familiar now, like a ritual that had always been there, just waiting to be discovered. "Thank you," Earl said after a few sips. "Not just for the help yesterday, for listening." "You've got a story worth listening to," Justin replied. "A rare one." Earl shook his head. "I'm just an old man trying to hold things together." "That's exactly why it matters," Justin said. "You're doing more than holding it together. You're keeping love alive in the hardest of places." There was a pause before Justin added, "I know you don't like help, but if someone showed up and wanted to do something for you, what would you say?" Earl's smile faded slightly. "I'd say there are people who need it more than me." Justin nodded. "Even if that person saw exactly how much you carry?" Earl looked at him, thoughtful. "Then I'd say they're kind, but misguided." Justin laughed, but there was something in his eyes that lingered, something unsaid. As the break ended, Earl stood, slower than before. Back to it. Justin stood too. I'll tag along a bit more. I'm learning the ropes. They returned to the carts, the summer heat rising around them, but their shared silence was full of meaning. Later that afternoon, after Earl's shift ended, the manager approached him with a small envelope. "What's this?" Earl asked, suspicious. "Company. Bonus," the manager said quickly, not meeting his eyes. "Just something we're doing for a few of the long-timers. You deserve it." Earl opened it slowly. Inside was a check large enough to ease his burden for months. His hands trembled. "I don't know what to say," he whispered. "Just say yes," the manager replied, walking away before Earl could ask more. That evening, Earl walked into his modest home like he was floating. Margaret sat in her chair, cradling their wedding photo. He knelt beside her, holding her hand. "My love," he said softly, "we have a chance now. Everything's going to be okay." Margaret didn't reply. At first, then, slowly, she looked into his eyes and smiled. The house was quiet, as it always was. But tonight, something felt different. Earl stood at the doorway of the living room, watching Margaret. She was seated in her usual chair, the faded wedding photo cradled gently in her lap. It was their ritual. Every evening, she'd sit there, staring at the photo as though trying to step into it. Most nights, she said nothing. Sometimes she murmured a name. Often, she just stared, lost in a place only she could see. But tonight, Earl felt something change. He couldn't explain it. Maybe it was the unexpected bonus, the weight lifted off his shoulders. Or maybe it was the way the sunset painted warm, gold across her cheeks. Whatever it was, he felt hope, real hope, stir for the first time in years. He knelt beside her, placing a gentle hand on hers. "Margaret," he whispered, "we have good news. Someone helped us. A kind soul. We don't have to worry for a little while. You're going to get everything you need, I promise." She didn't speak. He waited, and then, so softly he almost missed it, she said his name. "Earl." He froze. His heart leapt, almost afraid to move, to breathe. "Earl," she said again, this time with more clarity. Her eyes, those clouded eyes, were suddenly sharp, full of light, full of her. "It's you," she whispered. "I feel like I'm waking up from a dream." Earl's lips trembled. Yes, it's me. I'm here." Tears filled his eyes as he reached up and cupped her face in his hands. She leaned into his touch like she used to years ago, before everything faded. "Our house," she said, looking around slowly. "It's different, but it's still ours, isn't it?" Earl nodded, choking on emotion. "It is. It always has been." Margaret looked down at the photo in her lap. "I remember this day. It was beautiful." "The happiest day of my life," Earl replied. She looked at him again, and for a fleeting, perfect moment, he saw her, truly her, not the illness, not the silence, just the woman he had loved for a lifetime. "Dance with me," she said suddenly. He blinked. "What?" "Dance with me," she repeated, her voice firm, steady. Earl stood slowly, offering her his hand like he had on their wedding night decades ago. Margaret, still frail, rose with his support. He guided her to the center of the room and began to hum softly. It was their song, the one that played on that rainy June night when they became husband and wife. They danced, slowly, carefully, but they danced. Margaret's head rested against his shoulder, her eyes closed, and a smile curled on her lips. "I missed this," she whispered. "I never left," Earl replied, holding her close, afraid that if he let go, the moment would disappear. And for those few minutes, the world outside ceased to exist. There was no illness, no debt, no pain. Just two people, still in love, moving gently to the rhythm of a memory brought back to life. Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Margaret sat peacefully on the couch, her head resting against Earl's arm. They had talked for hours, laughing, reminiscing, cooking together like old times. Her lucidity had returned in a wave, and Earl had ridden that wave like a man trying to hold on to heaven itself. "Thank you for never giving up on me," she said, her voice quiet. "I love you, Margaret." "Always," Earl replied. Outside, parked, far enough not to be seen, Justin sat astride his motorcycle. The engine was off. He watched the warm light glowing from the little house, watched as Earl and Margaret sat side by side. He couldn't hear their words, but he didn't need to. He had done what he came to do. He started the engine, the soft hum echoing in the distance, and pulled away, leaving the moment untouched. A secret miracle that wasn't his to claim. And yet, as he rode off into the night, he couldn't stop smiling. The next morning, Earl woke earlier than usual. There was a strange lightness in his chest, as though some invisible weight had lifted. As he walked to the kitchen, he saw the envelope again, the one with the bonus check. He opened it, still unsure it was real. Inside, next to the check, he now noticed something he hadn't seen before. A note. It was simple. Just one line, handwritten in elegant script. "Take care of her. You are not alone." Earl read the words over and over. He didn't recognize the handwriting. He didn't know who had done this, but he knew what it meant. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't fighting alone. He prepared breakfast quietly, the way Margaret liked it. Toast, soft eggs, herbal tea. When he brought it to her, she smiled. Sleepy, but present. "Morning, love," he said. "Morning," she replied. "Did I dance last night?" Earl grinned. "You did. And you were perfect." She laughed softly. "Well, I hope you kept up." They sat together in peace, the silence no longer heavy but warm. Earl looked at her, at the woman he'd loved for a lifetime, and silently gave thanks for the stranger, for the gift, for the miracle of one more day, and far away, on a highway, wrapped in morning fog, Justin Bieber rode fast and free, his heart full, his mission complete. He didn't need recognition, because real kindness never asks for credit. Days passed. Margaret's clarity, like the warmth of a late summer sun, began to fade again. Slowly, quietly, the brightness in her eyes dimmed, and the confusion returned. But Earl didn't despair. He didn't mourn what slipped away. Instead, he held on to what had been given. A memory, a miracle, a night of laughter and dancing. That one evening, when time turned back and love stood still, had become a treasure carved into his heart. Whenever the days grew long and the nights lonely, he remembered her smile, her voice calling his name, and he knew, without question, that it hadn't been a dream. It was a gift. Each morning, he returned to the parking lot with a different strength. Not the kind that muscles bring, but the kind that memory fuels. He greeted shoppers with kindness. He pushed carts with calm. And when his knees ached and the sun burned, he whispered to himself the same phrase. Just one more day. But now, he said it with hope. Back at home, Earl and Margaret found new rhythms. He played her old songs. He read her letters from the past. Some days she smiled. Some days she didn't. But every evening, he knelt beside her with the photo of their wedding day and told her the same story, of how they danced again, of how someone, somewhere, gave them the chance to remember. She never asked who it was, and he never told, because some angels don't need names. And somewhere out there, on another stretch of highway, Justin rode on, his helmet on, his jacket zipped tight against the wind. He passed towns and lights and strangers, carrying with him the silent power of knowing he'd made a difference. He didn't need applause, he didn't need thanks, because what he gave, that day, wasn't charity. It was honor. It was love, disguised as a favor. It was seeing someone the world had forgotten and choosing not to look away. That, he knew, was the kind of power worth having. One quiet act, one private miracle, had shifted the course of 2 lives. And maybe, just maybe, it had shifted something in Justin too. As the sun set, he pulled over on a quiet road, removed his helmet, and looked up at the sky. The air was still, the moment sacred. Sometimes, he thought, the smallest gestures leave the deepest marks. He didn't know where he was headed next, but he knew he wasn't done. Not yet. Somewhere, someone else needed help, and he'd be there, even if they never knew his name. If this story touched your heart, hit the like button and leave a comment below. Who in your life needs a quiet miracle? Share this story. Let it move, let it heal, let it remind people that kindness still exists. And don't miss the next episode, where Justin Bieber goes undercover in a homeless shelter and meets someone who will change his own life forever. Subscribe now. The next miracle is just around the corner.